Have you ever wondered what diagnosis the Joker would receive in Arkham Asylum? What about what's really going through Edward Norton's mind during Fight Club? Welcome to a new segment of my channel in which I call Real Disorders. Here, I'll be discussing movie and TV characters who may be suffering from some sort of mental disorder. By analyzing their symptoms and behaviors on screen, I will offer information on treatment using the latest techniques available in the mental health field. For my first video, my producers have lined up the hottest film of 2015, Lethal Weapon. Lethal Weapon? This movie came out like 30 years ago. I would give a spoiler alert, but I'm pretty sure this came out on Laserdisc. There's only 5 ways to describe the protagonist Martin Riggs: badass cop, lone wolf, loving husband, 80s mullet, army veteran, not a good babysitter. Lethal Weapon is centered around Martin Riggs and his career as an LA cop. Throughout the film, he battles depression and suicidal tendencies, and unfortunately, Gary Busey. A little history about Martin Riggs. He joined the military at age 19, in which he spent most of his time in Special Forces Vietnam. When he returned, he got married and stayed so for 11 years until his wife died in a car accident. The movie picks up after her death, and we see Riggs display a wide array of symptoms: deep depression, insomnia, risky behavior, and an obsession with slapstick comedy. So what about a major depressive disorder? He certainly fits the bill, right? Actually, no. Riggs would need to have a loss of interest in extracurricular activities, which he doesn't have, or he would have to exhibit a depressed mood most of the day. But according to his behaviors, his depression seems to be limited to either mornings or nighttime. Well, what about alcoholism? We see him drinking a lot during the film, but just like depression, Riggs doesn't drink on the job or during the daytime. Actually, when he drinks, it seems more like a coping mechanism. Beer for breakfast. When we look at the main reasons for his behaviors, we can see that it stems from the death of his wife. There are disorders that concentrate on the impact that a traumatic event can have on a person's life, and one of the best candidates is post-traumatic stress disorder. But in order to see if this disorder applies, we have to decide how long the symptoms have likely presented. Upon close inspection of the movie, we can see a timestamp on a piece of police evidence as the date December 21st, 1986, only a couple days before Christmas. Popular gifts that year included Nintendo Entertainment System, Garfield Dome Tent, Jetcopter, and Gary Busey action figure with voice command. Now, in order to qualify for PTSD, the symptoms must have presented for longer than 1 month. Since his wife died in 1984 and the movie takes place in 86, I'd say that the 2-year time span gives Riggs plenty of time to brew that angst. In Lethal Weapon 2, Riggs explains that he was supposed to meet his wife for a romantic dinner that night she died, but ended up spacing out and never showing up. He tells this partially to tie in some exposition for the second film, but also to demonstrate the impact that the traumatic event had on his life.
At midnight before I got home to a ringing phone, so naturally I answered it. They told me she was killed in a car crash. I should have been driving it. I guess we'd have been all right, huh?
But let me ask you this. Riggs wasn't present for the accident, so can he still meet criteria for PTSD? Yeah, actually he can. Because learning that a traumatic event had happened to a close loved one can be just as equally impactful as if it had happened to you. Next up for symptoms, avoidance. And oh man, does he avoid his feelings. I mean, Riggs is a textbook workaholic, and it's not just for the perks.
Psychologist on the way.
When he's working, he completely immerses himself in the case. By doing this, he doesn't have to go back to his place and be alone with his thoughts. By the way, if you want to talk about detachment from others, you can't get any more detached than a trailer on a beach. I mean, look at this place. It's more suited for a hermit than anyone else. On top of that, Riggs very rarely listens to the rules, and he has a standoffish personality that makes it difficult for others to like him. I wouldn't be surprised if his only friend on MySpace was Tom. This joke brought to you by 2003. Another symptom under PTSD is angry outbursts under no provocation. Either that's what's happening here, or he really doesn't like televangelists. And then there's this annoyance he has with a jumper. I mean, just look at those eyes. Aside from breaking into people's house early in the morning, he also suffers from sleep disturbance.
What do you do, sleep with that thing on your pillow?
I would if I slept.
In wrapping this up, we have to consider one of the most important criteria for making a diagnosis. Do his behaviors cause distress to himself or those around him? To that, I'd have to say that if you're giving mouth hugs to a 9mm Beretta, then yeah, it's causing you some distress. I mean, even his partner and the police psychiatrist question if he should even be in the field. Because of the evidence presented, and because Riggs fits all criteria of the disorder, it's decided that Martin Riggs meets the diagnostic criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder due to the symptoms he presents in association with his wife's death. In the original script, Riggs was supposed to part ways with his partner and give up crime fighting altogether. Personally, though, I'm happy they changed that. Riggs was eventually able to lay his guilt to rest and find someone to love and have a child with. One could argue that a strong relationship with his partner's family helped him off the suicidal edge. Plus, and possibly my favorite part, the sequels, which will hopefully not continue.
PTSD is a disorder that affects many of our soldiers and law enforcement, but it can also affect those that have stressful or extreme situations happen in their lives. Some of the most effective treatments for this disorder are cognitive behavioral therapy, relaxation techniques, and certain medications. I've included below some links to credible websites that offer information and advice on PTSD. If you or someone you know may be suffering from the symptoms mentioned, I encourage you to reach out and utilize these valuable resources. Thank you for watching my video on Martin Riggs from Lethal Weapon. Do you agree with my diagnosis? Leave a comment below if you have a character in mind you'd like me to diagnose next. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time on Real Disorders.